What could be more frustrating than a liberal judge? Perhaps a conservative one who adopts liberal stances when it counts the most. Some conflicts aren't waged with weapons. They're resolved with decisions, and some treacheries don't involve blades. A significant Supreme Court ruling has just shaken Washington, not due to an unexpected outcome, but because of the identity of the deliverer. Amy Coney Barrett, once heralded as Trump's judicial golden child, embodies the essence of Scalia, representing a steadfast commitment to constitutional originalism and serving as a pivotal asset in Trump's conservative agenda. And now Barrett has cast her vote against Trump, not in some ambiguous civil matter, nor in a convoluted tax code interpretation. No, she overstepped in a conflict regarding territorial laws and the essence of national existence. A situation in which the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 was brought back, not for political reasons, but for the sake of safety. These individuals hail from Venezuela, associated with gangs, marked by violence, entrenched in our neighborhoods. Trump murmured, his gaze fixed on the unfolding news broadcast. We carried out their deportation in accordance with the law, supported by established precedent, to ensure the safety of our nation. And Barrett, she desires their return. The words escaped his lips with the weight of a judgment that unexpectedly turned against the presiding authority. No U.S. president in recent history has had to witness someone he personally appointed to the highest court in the nation turn around and use that position to dismantle the very foundation he established. Amy Coney Barrett, the same individual whom Trump stood by in the face of a Senate mob, relentless media scrutiny, and a surge of ideological attacks, has now turned her back on the very president who elevated her to her position of power. However, Barrett went beyond merely casting a vote. She resonated with those who hold the view that foreign nationals connected to criminal cartels are entitled to complete procedural fairness. Due process for those involved in cartel activities, Trump growled. I believe the Constitution was meant to safeguard Americans, not to extend privileges to those who resort to violence. At this juncture, the matter transcends mere legality. It's intimate, calculated, fundamental. Was this a ruling grounded in the law or a betrayal of political trust? An exercise in constitutional analysis or a challenge to the nation's integrity? Trump might not possess every solution, yet he is unwavering in this belief. I handed her the gavel, and now she's bringing it down hard on my hand. Thus, the conflict commences, transforming from a mere clash between Trump and the liberal left to a confrontation with the traitor in robes who is betrayed from within. To grasp the depth of that betrayal, we must take a step back to the instant Trump enacted a long-overlooked law. And America confronted an incursion unlike any it had ever experienced. The federal district court located in Washington, D.C., lacked a gavel, devoid of any ceremonial chime. This morning, the case of Doe versus Department of Homeland Security had everyone in the courtroom sitting up a little straighter, as if an unseen force had gently touched the very core of the nation, casting a solemn air over the proceedings. Judge James Boasberg, with his silver hair and perfectly parted glasses, exuded an air of precision as he glanced at the folder before him. 31 individuals, all Venezuelan nationals, are under suspicion for connections to Trinagua, a gang currently categorized as a top domestic threat. Each of them was set for urgent removal due to a recently enacted executive order, and he was on the verge of intervening. Boasberg's voice resonated with clarity and strength, cutting through the chaos like a finely honed blade in moments of urgency. Urgency is frequently confused with authority, yet this court is not here to cater to impatience. A moment of tension. We cannot protect our borders by undermining constitutional processes, nor can we uphold the law by disregarding human dignity. Every word flowed as if it had matured in the cask of ethical supremacy, yet the reporters positioned in the front row were not perceiving a verdict. They were receiving a communication, and the creator of that communication wasn't necessarily Judge Boasberg at the edge of the case file. A striking reference subtly challenged the established norms, referencing Scott's faltering term in the 2024 opinion delivered by Justice Amy Coney Barrett. Her name was never uttered. The entire legal framework Boasberg presented was unnecessary, as it merely reflected and extended the doctrine she had already committed to. For those who remained unconvinced, There was the off-record call made by Busberg's young clerk the night before. An untraceable number, no transcript, just a single sentence. They will require a public voice. Now they possessed one, and Busberg wasn't merely interpreting the law. He was enhancing it. They are not offenders. They are people who have yet to face trial, and if we accept an executive order that nullifies the legal status of a whole group, what prevents it from doing the same to yours tomorrow? That was not a cautionary note. A weapon shrouded in robes, brandished from the bench. The media exploded with fervor. MSNBC referred to it as a triumph of empathy. CNN's headline stated, Barrett's legacy endures in Busberg ruling. Digital symbols proliferate effortlessly. Due process matters significantly. Number sign families are meant to unite. Embrace the number sign law, do not fear it. Yet throughout the city, where hashtags fail to drown out the wail of sirens, President Trump remained in the Oval Office, his gaze locked on the screen. He remained silent. There was no obligation for him to do so. It was only upon seeing the name Justice Barrett on the chiron that he uttered a response. No anger, no raised voice, just a succinct, chilling statement. Yet another judge engaging in political maneuvering, while others stand by and allow it to happen. As soon as the words escaped his lips, Trump rose to his feet, instinctively and without any cue from those around him. The CNN logo and chiron continued to glide across the screen. Mass deportation block referenced in Justice Barrett's opinion. He faced his chief of staff, his tone steady and resolute, reminiscent of a command issued on the front lines. Request an urgent briefing from DHS legal counsel. 30 minutes later, the White House Situation Room buzzed with Homeland Security legal advisors, the ICC director, and the Deputy Director of Intelligence. A map illuminated the screen, with 12 states highlighted in a striking red trend, indicating Dear Agua activity. The deputy from DHS confirmed the utilization of shell warehouses, NGO accounts supported by federal grants, and encrypted domestic communications. The lead counsel flung a file onto the table. In the past 48 hours, 31 individuals have been taken into custody by ICE. All was released this morning by a court order ruling regarding the Supreme Court's president for the fall term of 2024. He paused, his voice lowering as he conveyed the written opinion by Justice Amy Coney Barrett. Trump maintained a calm demeanor. He settled into his chair, opened a side drawer, and pulled out a tattered document detailing the actions of extraterrestrial foes. In 1798, cartels operate without the need for firearms. There exists a body of case law, and there is an individual associated with that law who dons a robe. The lawyer paused, uncertainty flickering across their face. Mr. President, this legislation has remained dormant since World War II. Its revival could establish a perilous precedent. Trump's gaze remained fixed on the report. His hand glided toward the pen. Even more perilous is when judicial decisions claim lives beyond the reach of firearms. A solitary mark of ink, resolute and unwavering, transcending borders, nations, enforcement, and legalities. The directive to implement the Alien Adversaries Protocol was now formalized. Only removal devoid of appeals or hearings. Trump remained in his seat, his gaze locked onto a single footnote in the DHS report. The impact of judicial precedent on SCOTUS Barrett. He remained silent, merely gesturing to the chief of staff. Have her come in by herself. Without assistance, without lenses, without documentation. Mr. President, the hour is late, and I can no longer afford to remain silent. The East Wing hallway of the White House held a stillness reminiscent of a chapel following a funeral. Barrett entered the room solo, hair meticulously styled, devoid of makeup, and without any notes in hand. Only the gaze of someone who was fully aware of the reason for her summons. Trump remained still, gazing out the window. He remained facing away. The glow behind him stretched a lengthy shadow over the marble floor, dividing the space into two realms, one of light and the other of scrutiny. I recall the moment you pledged your allegiance, he stated, his tone steady yet frigid. You rested your hand on the Constitution, met my gaze directly, and vowed to uphold the law impartially, without hesitation or bias. Then he turned and his gaze locked dead on her. Now I wonder, did you look through me that day as if I was just a stepping stone to some philosophy I was never meant to understand? Barrett didn't step back, but her voice came soft, the kind of softness that in politics means frost, not weakness. I kept my oath. I have maintained the integrity of the Constitution. I remain neutral. Remaining neutral is, in itself, a choice. Amy Trump interrupted. It's common knowledge that all people do. He moved in closer. Now, with only a narrow table separating them, 31 were released, not due to their innocence, but rather because of procedural matters. There was no requirement for you to sign the order. All that was needed was for your past to convey your message. Barrett raised his gaze. Her gaze remained unwavering. Even in the absence of a conviction, an individual retains their rights. And if fear is all it takes to dismantle those rights, then the Constitution is merely a decorative phrase hanging on the wall. Trump nodded, yet his expression suggested a lack of agreement. It was the sort of nod that suggested a person had absorbed just the right amount of information. The issue isn't that you're mistaken. Your fear lies not in making mistakes, but in the possibility of being unliked. Believing that remaining aloof from the struggle keeps you untainted is a misconception. Purity does not bring back those who have fallen. Amy, I approach law with a clear mind, Barrett stated calmly. I refrain from making judgments based on lineage or sensational news, and I certainly won't alter foundational principles due to a late-night directive. Trump hesitated for a moment, then advanced one last time. His voice lowered, not to assert authority, but to convey a message. I can take care of myself. I urge you to stand with this nation, and tonight I envision you positioned beyond its borders. Barrett remained silent, yet her fingers tightened just a fraction. Trump gazed at her one final time, devoid of anger, lacking disappointment, simply embodying a singular emotion. Clarity forged from betrayal. Please don't feel the need to be dishonest. I simply require you to stand firm against those who master the art of concealing dangers within the intricacies of legal theory. His footsteps resonated sharply, an unbroken echo traveling down the marble corridor behind him. Barrett remained motionless, neither stepping back nor moving forward, as the once solid pillar of trust that separated them had vanished. Less than a day later, every camera in America focused on one room, the Supreme Court courtroom, where laws flowed like verses of poetry. Truth is shaped into catchy phrases, and each statement holds the potential to spark a clash of beliefs. The courtroom was overflowing with people. The atmosphere was charged with the anticipation of conflict. Each seat was occupied by a member of the press. Every gaze was a story poised to break. And in this era of instant broadcasts where a single tweet carries more weight than a court document, this hearing transcended legal matters. It revolved around the struggle for narrative control beyond the media, defining their boundaries. MSNBC launched the initial strike with a glaring graphic, invoking oppression under the guise of safety. CNN, with a touch more sophistication, navigated the complexities, presenting it as a pivotal moment for presidential authority or potential wartime excess, while Fox News bypassed the subtleties entirely. Ultimate clash. The legal team presented their arguments succinctly, clearly, and firmly rooted in constitutional principles. A nation possesses not only the right but also the responsibility to protect its borders. The Alien Enemies Act is a reality, not a mere concept. This is a record of legal events. It was crafted for instances of unspoken conflict, and if the current landscape of drug cartels and asymmetric threats, along with transnational violence, doesn't qualify as war, then the term war has lost its significance. The courtroom held its breath, and then the lights shifted to her. If there were ever a stage for hypocrisy, Amy Coney Barrett has just taken center stage as its leading figure. This was not a judicial hearing, to put it plainly. The event was a revered TED Talk, backed by the Coalition for the Abolition of Borders and Livestream, emanating from the Church of Progressive Sentiment. There she sat, encircled by marble pillars intended to represent constitutional restraint. Yet her words held no legal weight. It was a harmonious display of ethical remorse, adorned with eloquent embellishments and perfectly timed. Barrett leaned into the microphone, her gaze piercing and precise, her opening line delivered with a careful, deliberate touch. The Alien Enemies Act was enacted before women had the right to vote, before civil rights were recognized. Before we grasp that loyalty transcends birthplace, we must ask ourselves, are we upholding the law or merely reenacting its biases? The broadcast of Psychonin flowed effortlessly, as MSNBC transformed it into a lyrical expression of spoken-word poetry. One commentator asserted that Barrett not only interprets the Constitution but also uplifts it. Yet Barrett had more to say. The law must uphold justice, not cower before the age of a statute. Age does not confer sanctity. What is old can often be perilous. The message was clear and undeniable. Barrett wasn't merely challenging the statute. She was redefining the core principles of national self-defense, portraying it as questionable, even repressive. Trump's legal team remained as motionless as statues. The atmosphere was thick with tension, as the echoes of Barrett's final remarks from the morning hearing lingered in the chamber, a haunting reminder of a verdict yet to be delivered. The court had recessed, cameras were out, clerks had cleared, but one figure entered uninvited, without a script: Donald J. Trump. No lawyers, no talking points, just a former president stepping into the marble echo of a system he once influenced, now feeling the weight of betrayal as Barrett remained unmoved. In her robes, with hands folded and a dignified distance, she understood that this time he sought the answer. No spoken debates, no procedural inquiries, just two individuals, one boundary drawn, and a final confrontation waged through language in that stillness when every noise was merely a reverberation of the past. Barrett sat poised, her robe elegantly cascading around her, hands resting assertively on the table as though they were off-limits to all. She was certain that this time he would demand a response. There were no further discussions, no lingering procedural inquiries, just two individuals, a delicate line drawn in a concluding clash crafted solely from language. As the atmosphere in the room thickened with an unspoken tension, Barrett broke the silence, his voice cutting through the quiet night with a firm declaration. I hold no opposition to you, Mr. President. I stand against the direction in which you are heading. Trump halted, enveloped in silence, before offering a subtle, wordless smile. No, you aren't standing against me. You challenge the nature of existence. A world where the wicked show no remorse is unbearable. You long for the law to carry the fragrance of jasmine, despite the decay of corpses strewn across our borders. Barrett tilted her head slightly, maintaining an air of cold dignity. I desire a nation where the legal framework remains steadfast, unaffected by the transient sentiments of any one government. I didn't wear this robe to protect you from your outrage. Trump struck the table with his hand, his voice deep and echoing like the groan of an old cellar door. No, you don it to conceal yourself, to shield behind ideals so you can avoid choosing a side. You refer to it as fear. When I safeguard our people, what is it that you defend? The truck drivers transporting fentanyl across our borders in frozen containers. Barrett's fist tightened, a quiet intensity replacing her previous apathy. I stand firm in my commitment to the Constitution, regardless of its popularity on social media. I advocate for boundaries in the absence of constraints. Your strength will mirror the very force you pledge to oppose. Trump chuckled, this time with a sharp bitterness and disdain. Oh, marvelous once more. It embodies the intricate art of legal reasoning found within the Ivy League. Halting the malevolent leads to oppression. Apprehending wrongdoers amounts to subjugation. Ensuring the safety of our borders resembles a subtle form of authoritarianism. He leaned in closer, his voice barely above a murmur. You're not standing against me. You're preparing for a submission to the Atlantic, a piece titled How I Was Nominated by Trump, only to find my dignity once again while seated on the bench. Barrett pressed her lips together, steadfast and resolute. If you believe that every act of dissent is simply an act, then maybe you've overlooked that not everyone who distances themselves from you is lacking in courage. Some individuals retreat because they've truly come to a realization. Trump acknowledged with a slow nod, displaying no surprise. So you've finally decided to join the land of the living, have you? All right, But remaining conscious while allowing others to perish is as misguided as fantasizing on a pedestal of luxury. I don't require a judge who quotes Rousseau. I seek someone bold enough to confront the victims directly, unafraid to engage with their reality rather than shying away for the sake of popularity. Barrett straightened her posture, her gaze unwavering. And I don't require a leader who thinks America belongs to him alone. The execution of justice does not cater to its enforcer. It looms over you, and if you believe I'm turning against you by expressing a different opinion, then a judge is unnecessary. Puppet is essential. Barrett had just concluded his words, and the atmosphere felt charged, suspended in a moment between two breaths. No pen was clicked, nor was there a throat cleared. Trump chose not to respond. He gazed at her, lingering and unwavering, devoid of anger, yet just frigid enough to compel the very air to question its existence. Then he turned away, not to retreat, but as if he had gathered enough to proceed to the next step. At that moment, Boosberg emerged, as though his arrival had been synchronized with the very pulse of the courtroom. Boosberg moved away from the gallery seats with the poise of a performer stepping into the spotlight, not as a judge, but as a Greek tragedian poised for his moment to shine. Silver hair cut with precision, eyes honed by years of courtroom drama. He required no introduction. All those present in that chamber were acutely aware of his principles, a morality woven with golden threads, bestowed from on high, never needing to confront its own repercussions. Barrett started as if he were crafting a masterpiece that was already secured in place. A nation finds its strength in the humility of its laws. She averted her gaze from Trump as she spoke, yet there was no uncertainty among those present regarding the target of her words. Boosberg seized the baton with an ease that suggested countless hours of practice behind them. What we are observing is the subtle resurgence of a phenomenon this nation once accepted: internment without trial, mass expulsion, and the exercise of executive power cloaked in fear. He lingered momentarily, allowing the courtroom camera to seize the moment of a furrowed brow on a pivotal vote. Justice Pence suspended in the air. CNN reported on a breaking story regarding Kieran Scotus facing pressure and resistance from the bench. The board appeared to lean in a direction, yet Trump remained silent, proving that silence can be a powerful tool in its own right, when the individual grasping it understands the precise instant to take action. He stood without paper, without a podium, merely a voice that echoed like the aftermath of a collision. Everyone was aware of what had transpired, yet no one was willing to acknowledge their role in steering the course. Carlos, just 8 years old, was tragically shot in the back while enjoying a ride on his bike. The shooter, affiliated with a gang, was previously detained by ICE. The court set him free due to the interpreter's lack of certification in Spanish. A journalist lightly tapped his microphone, perhaps to ensure he was still alive and engaged in the moment. Trump maintained a calm demeanor. There was no obligation on his part. The child was beyond the need for a verdict. He required just one additional day to exist. Boosberg. Always the moral order attempted to intervene. We do not craft legislation through sorrow, Mr. President. Trump gazed upward, his eyes sharp and unyielding. Yet, there is an individual here who is employing lipstick to formulate policy and labeling it as justice. He opened a leather case, revealing not briefs or declarations, but a list of names, ages, dates of death, and causes, accompanied by photographs, raw and unposed. 13 Americans, all lost after being safeguarded by the same system. Barrett and Boosberg had just consecrated. No one offered a gesture. No inquiries were made. There was no necessity for them to do so. Trump questioned which law ensured their survival, which court protected them from betrayal, a strangling cord, or the confines of a cold truck. Justice Kavanaugh, the final holdout, shut his folder with a decisive motion. He cast his gaze downward, not at documents, but at his shoes, as though contemplating the weight of existence. No disputes. Barrett sensed it. The partnership with Boosberg had become nothing more than a distant memory, barely visible on CNN's scrolling ticker. She attempted to retort. What unfolds tomorrow when sorrow steps back into this courtroom? Will you allow feelings to shape your next decision? Trump stepped back, just once. His voice was steely. I don't gauge justice by the tears shed. I gauge it by the fallen, aligning myself with those who continue to draw breath. It was not a final statement. It was a sentence, the last one. A court clerk delivered his words with a tone as sharp and precise as a finely honed instrument, adhering strictly to the rules of procedure. The court is now ready to hear the closing statements. Every side has been given a duration of 5 minutes. No one replied. No one needed to. Barrett locked her hands on the lectern, her face as unreadable as her legacy. Boasberg offered a subtle nod, his presence resonating like a finely tuned prelude. They did not stroll to the center for a discussion. They arrived to construct a framework for a demise they had already penned. Boasberg was the first to speak. His rhythm was polished. The courtroom refined each phrase, meticulously stripped of emotion to deliver a precise blow with reason. The Constitution should not be a backdrop for fear. If we grant executive power today over individuals who have not been convicted, then tomorrow innocence will merely be a matter of bureaucratic procedure. He lingered just long enough for a courtroom camera to capture a pivotal moment. Justice squinted at MSNBC as a headline scrolled by, highlighting the clash between executive overreach and the authority of the bench. Trump did not take a stand. He remained unyielding. He gave a slight nod to an aide, who then slid a slender envelope over to Barrett. Test cases classified, elegantly scrolled in red marker on the front. Barrett opened it and beheld what even Boasberg's eloquence couldn't erase. Revise 3 internal ICE memos, address 3 detainees, manage 3 court interventions, and account for 3 deceased Americans within 6 months of release. Only images, identities, and dates, all marked and authenticated by her own signature. She clenched her hold. Boasberg leaned in and murmured something, possibly a soothing remedy for the soul. Yet this time she remained silent, for she had finally perceived it. She wasn't grasping a beacon of freedom. She had been distributing blades and garments. She had completely misinterpreted the law. She had protected creatures of darkness, and she had been aware of their identities. Trump refrained from stepping up to the podium. He merely requested a moment to express himself. Your understanding is not a requirement for me. Please reflect on the situation you allowed to unfold. He remained silent. He showed no signs of mourning. He enumerated the names of Americans who lost their lives due to the obstruction of deportation. In the spirit of empathy, every name resonated with finality. Every victim, a final statement etched in stone. A single swing vote justice touched the file, glanced through the pages, and remarked simply, "You cannot safeguard a process that results in corpses." There was no response, no opposing viewpoint, because logic had simply yielded to the truth of the situation. The vote was 5-4, with Barrett casting the dissenting vote, yet no one showed any signs of hesitation. She failed to provide a concluding statement. She kept her gaze down, for the faces on that bench had long since turned away from her. The nation did not succumb to liberal judges. It became the responsibility of those who recalled the art of playing liberally, just as it was crucial to do so. Boasberg rose to voice an objection. He was not invited to share his thoughts, as if even logic had withdrawn from the conversation. A crimson stamp marked the conclusion of the court's decree. Petition approved, lower court decision overturned, immediate implementation required. A pen rests quietly, a motion submitted, and a nation that has rendered its verdict without seeking consent. The darkness enveloped the White House, thick and heavy, reminiscent of a swirling snowstorm. No one had requested it in the Oval Office. The gentle illumination of a desk lamp created delicate shadows over the map of the southern border, affixed to the distant wall. Crimson circles highlighted recent flashpoints, lingering and unhealed to the left. CNN aired the hearing again, with Trump reciting names, Barrett holding the folder tightly, and Boasberg interrupted before finishing his thought. The anchor conveyed a grave message regarding a judicial upheaval, marking a somber day for constitutional limits. The sound wafted through the room, reminiscent of an alien dialect from another world, a place where the concept of truth lingered in the air, resting on the surface of a time-worn photo frame. Trump and Barrett 2020. The day of the nomination marked by a firm handshake, bright smiles, a moment once seen as a legacy now reduced to mere evidence. He neither tore it nor burned it, nor did he flip it down. He carefully set it face down atop the map, precisely over the area marked as Priority Region Federal Security. She had stepped beyond the boundaries he was bound to protect. He lifted the phone, hesitated, then set it down again. No call will take place tonight. No one remained to provide an explanation. Following a lengthy silence, he uttered words that were not directed at anyone present, nor aimed at any recording apparatus, but rather released into a nation still grappling with the events of a single day. They may label this as a triumph, yet all I perceive is a roster of identities. We lingered far too long to revise beyond the lofty windows. Explosions of light erupted in the night sky. Cheers resonated from Lafayette Square all the way to the West Wing. A tweet of the year was being shared by someone, somewhere. Trump stood apart, devoid of a stage, absent of velvet podiums, lacking the flash of cameras, leaving only silence and a resonating frequency. He opted for radio, the classic style reminiscent of Roosevelt, when words served not as embellishments, but as guidance. His voice remained steady. It rested, weighted and deliberate, like a hand poised on the table before the decisive play. Once, I had faith in the notion that guidelines and regulations could maintain order, yet I have witnessed the consequences when individuals adhere to rules while malevolence alters the landscape. A brief, piercing silence, the sort that signals an impending revelation. Justice doesn't come by itself. It requires an individual to grasp the pen, to bear its burden, to declare this limit and no more than a single breath in a concluding line, not for recognition, but for remembrance. They sought compassion while maintaining their integrity. I selected blood in a nation that continues to draw breath.